The stars outside the viewport were cold and distant. They always were this far from Earth. Molly Grant stared at her console, watching the endless stream of data scroll past her tired eyes. She had been on duty for 6 hours, and nothing interesting had happened. Nothing interesting ever happened on patrol runs. The Terran patrol vessel Resolute Dawn drifted through the black emptiness of space, like a steel shark swimming through an endless ocean. It was a small ship, built for speed and reconnaissance rather than heavy combat. The crew of 47 souls had been away from home for 3 months now, mapping the edges of known space and watching for trouble. Molly was about to reach for her coffee when something caught her attention. A blip on her screen, then another. A pattern emerged from the static, weak but definitely there. She leaned forward and adjusted her equipment, trying to clean up the signal. "Captain," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge. "I'm picking up something. It looks like a distress call." Captain Jake Holloway looked up from his command chair. He was a man in his late 40s, with gray hair at his temples and lines on his face that told stories of too many battles and not enough sleep. He had served in the Mars Uprising 20 years ago and had seen things that still visited him in his dreams. "Source?" he asked, already rising from his seat. "Valkyrie, sir. The signal is coming from about 12 light hours away. It's weak, but it's definitely a standard distress pattern." Lieutenant Commander Diana Price, the executive officer, moved to stand beside Molly's station. She was younger than the captain, with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped calculating risks. "That sector is flagged," she said. "Crixian territory. Or at least, they claim it is." Jake walked over to look at the data himself. The Valkyrie were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their scientific achievements and their complete lack of military capability. Their bones were hollow, their bodies fragile, and their homeworld had gravity so light that a human child could jump over a building there. They had never fought a war in their entire history. The Crixians, on the other hand, were the opposite. They were conquerors, predators who had built an empire on the bones of weaker species. Standing 7 feet tall with armored bodies and 4 arms ending in claws that could tear through metal, they were the monsters that other aliens told their children about. "How old is this signal?" Jake asked. "Hard to say with the interference," Molly replied. "But I'd guess at least a few days. Maybe a week." Diana shook her head slowly. "Captain, if we go in there, we could be starting a war. The Crixians don't take kindly to humans entering space they consider theirs." Jake stood silent for a long moment, staring at the blinking light on the screen that represented someone crying out for help. He thought about what the Valkyrie must be feeling right now. Afraid, alone, dying maybe. Hoping that someone, anyone, would hear them. "They're asking for help," he said finally. "That's enough. Set a course." The bridge crew moved into action. The ship's engines powered up, and the Resolute Dawn jumped into hyperspace, bending the fabric of space itself to cross the vast distance in minutes instead of years. When they emerged, they found exactly what they had feared. A Valkyrie research station hung in the shadow of a dead moon, broken and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Huge holes had been torn in its hull. Debris floated around it like a cloud of metal snowflakes. And attached to it like a parasitic insect was a Crixian raider ship. "Life signs?" Jake asked, his voice tight. The science officer ran his scans twice before answering. 7 Valkyrie. Barely alive. And I'm reading at least 30 Crixians still aboard. 30. Jake did the math in his head. His Marine complement was 8 soldiers. The odds were not good by any normal measure, but humans had never been normal. "Get me Sergeant Garza," Jake ordered. Pete Garza arrived on the bridge 5 minutes later, still pulling on his combat armor. He was built like a brick wall, with scars on his arms from fights he had won and one fight he had almost lost. Behind him came his team, Corporal Denise Lott, a quiet woman who never missed a shot. Private First Class Kevin Marsh, the youngest of the group, still eager to prove himself. And Hannah Vance, the combat medic who had pulled more soldiers back from death's door than she could count. Jake showed them the situation. The station layout appeared on the holographic display, with red dots marking the Crixians and green dots showing where the Valkyrie survivors were hiding. The civilians are barricaded in what looks like a botanical lab on Deck 7, Jake explained. The Crixians are hunting them. They're taking their time, enjoying it. Pete studied the display, his jaw tight. Rules of engagement? Protect the civilians. Neutralize the threat. Jake met the sergeant's eyes. Whatever it takes. Pete nodded and turned to his team. You heard the captain. Gear up. We're going in hard. As the Marines left to prepare, Diana moved close to Jake and spoke quietly. This could go very wrong. It could, Jake agreed. But those people in there have been waiting for someone to help them. Maybe for days. They've been listening to their friends die, one by one, and hoping against hope that someone would come. He looked at her with tired, determined eyes. We're that someone. 20 minutes later, the boarding pod launched from the Resolute Dawn and crossed the distance to the station in seconds. It hit the damaged hull with a controlled impact, and cutting torches began burning through the metal. Inside the station, Tavala heard the sound. The Valkyrie scientist pressed herself against the wall of the botanical lab, surrounded by the 6 other survivors. They had been hiding here for 6 days, living on recycled water and fear. They had heard their colleagues screaming as the Crixians found them. They had accepted that they were going to die. The sound of something burning through metal was new. What is that? One of the younger scientists whispered. TEV single quotes Ayla didn't know. The Crixians had no need to cut through walls. They simply tore them down. Then, through the station's damaged communication system, she heard something else. Voices, speaking a language her translator could barely process. The words were harsh and efficient. Breach complete. Moving to objective. Humans. The words surfaced in her memory like a half-forgotten dream. She had read about them once. A young species from a heavy-gravity world. Supposedly quite primitive. She wondered what they were doing here. She was about to find out. The corridors of the research station were dark and filled with the smell of death. Emergency lights flickered red, casting long shadows on the walls. Bodies lay where they had fallen, Valkyrie scientists who had tried to run and failed. Pete Garza moved through the darkness like a ghost made of steel. His armor was matte black, designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In his hands, he carried a weapon that most galactic species had banned centuries ago, a kinetic rifle that fired metal slugs at speeds fast enough to punch through starship armor. Behind him, his team followed in perfect formation. Denise Lott watched their left flank, her rifle sweeping the shadows. Kevin Marsh covered the right. Hannah Vance stayed in the middle, her medical kit ready, her sidearm drawn. They had been aboard for 3 minutes. They had not yet fired a shot. That was about to change. Pete held up a fist and the team stopped. Ahead, at the end of the corridor, something moved. Something big. The Crixians stepped into view and Kevin felt his stomach tighten. He had seen pictures of them during training, but pictures did not capture the reality. The creature stood 7 feet tall, its body covered in plates of natural armor that looked like polished black stone. 4 arms hung at its sides, each ending in claws that could cut through bone like paper. Its eyes were solid red, without pupils, and they fixed on the humans with hungry interest. Wow, the Crixian said, its translator rendering the words in a buzzing mechanical voice. What do we have here? More prey? Pete didn't answer with words. He answered with his rifle. The first shot hit the Crixian in the chest and staggered it backward. The second shot cracked its chest plate. The third shot went through the crack and into the body beneath. The creature fell, and it did not get up. "Contact," Pete said calmly into his communicator. "One down." Continuing to objective. The sound of gunfire echoed through the station, and the hunt changed. The Crixians had been the hunters. Now they were being hunted. Elsewhere on the station, Tavala and the other survivors listened to the sounds of battle. They heard the sharp crack of human weapons and the screaming roars of Crixians. They heard bodies hitting floors. They heard the chaos of violence moving through the corridors like a storm. But something was wrong. Something was different. The screaming was not coming from the humans. In a cargo bay, 2 decks above the botanical lab, Pete Garza faced 3 Crixians alone. His team had been separated by a collapsed section of corridor, and he had pushed forward rather than fall back. It was a decision that most species would consider suicidal. Pete was not most species. The first Crixian lunged at him, all 4 arms reaching for his throat. Pete stepped to the side, grabbed one of the arms, and twisted. The joint broke with a wet snap. The creature howled and swung at him with its other arms, and one of the claws found its mark, punching through his shoulder armor and into the flesh beneath. The pain was enormous. Pete ignored it. He pulled the claw out of his shoulder, used it to stab the Crixian in the eye, and then turned to face the other 2. Blood poured down his arm. His left hand was going numb. He shifted his rifle to his right hand and kept fighting. The second Crixian died with a bullet in its brain. The third tried to run. Pete shot it in the back. He stood in the cargo bay surrounded by bodies, breathing hard, his shoulder on fire. He pressed his good hand against the wound and activated his communicator. "Garza here. Cargo bay is clear. Taking a moment to patch myself up." On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Captain Jake Holloway listened to the reports coming in from the boarding team. His face was calm, but his hands were tight on the arms of his chair. "Sergeant Garza is injured," the communications officer reported. "He's continuing the mission." Diana looked at Jake with something like wonder in her eyes. "He got stabbed through the shoulder, and he's still going?" "That's what humans do," Jake said quietly. "We keep going." Back on the station, Hannah Vance reached the botanical lab first. She had fought her way through 6 Crixians to get there, killing 4 and wounding 2. Her leg had been cut by a glancing blow from a claw, and a piece of metal from an explosion had embedded itself in her thigh. She had not slowed down. The door to the lab was locked and barricaded from the inside. Hannah pounded on it with her fist. "This is Corporal Hannah Vance of the Terran Federation," she called out. "We're here to rescue you. Open the door." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the door opened. Tavala stared at the creature standing in the doorway. It was small compared to a Crixian, barely 6 feet tall, covered in armor that was splashed with blood. Its face was visible through its helmet visor, soft features, 2 eyes, a flat face with a strange curved shape on its mouth. It was smiling. "Are you the survivors?" the creature asked. Its voice was tired but warm. Tavala nodded, unable to speak. "Good. We're going to get you out of here. Is anyone injured?" We are weak from hunger," Tavala managed to say. "But not wounded." "That's good." "That's very good." The human stepped into the lab, and Tavala saw the blood flowing from the wound in its leg. The piece of metal was still there, sticking out of the flesh. "You are injured," Tavala said. The human looked down at its leg as if noticing it for the first time. "Oh, this? Don't worry about it. The adrenaline's got it handled. We'll deal with it once you're safe." Tavala did not know what adrenaline was. She would later learn that it was a chemical that human bodies produced when they were hurt or scared. It made them stronger. It made them faster. It made them able to ignore wounds that would kill most other species. She looked at this creature. This human standing before her with metal in its leg and blood on its armor. Still smiling. Still focused on protecting strangers it had never met. And for the first time in 6 days, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The rest of the rescue happened quickly. Pete Garza and Denise Lott cleared the path to the docking point, killing the last of the Crixians who tried to stop them. Kevin Marsh helped carry the weakest Valkyrie survivors, moving through the station with careful speed. When they reached the boarding pod, Pete counted heads. 7 survivors. 4 Marines. All alive. Mission complete, he reported to the Resolute Dawn. We're coming home. As the pod detached from the station and flew back toward the ship, Tavala watched through the viewport. The human called Hannah sat beside her, finally allowing another Marine to look at her wounded leg. Why did you come? Tavala asked. Why did you risk your lives for us? Hannah looked at her with those strange human eyes, soft and hard at the same time. Because you asked for help, she said simply. That's what we do. Tavala thought about those words for a long time. She thought about what kind of species would fly into enemy territory, fight monsters 3 times their size, and take wounds that should have killed them. All for strangers they had never met. She realized she was not afraid of the humans. She was afraid of what it meant that creatures like this existed. The report from the Resolute Dawn traveled across the stars at the speed of light, bouncing from relay station to relay station until it reached Earth. There, in a building that had no name on any map, Admiral Marcus Dunn read it 3 times. He was an old man now, his hair completely white and his body bent from decades of service. But his mind was still sharp, and he understood immediately what this report meant. A single patrol vessel had entered Crixian space, engaged their warriors, and rescued citizens of another species. It was exactly the kind of incident that could start a war, or end one before it began. He called a meeting of Terran Strategic Operations. Generals and admirals gathered around a table, studying the footage from the boarding team's cameras. They watched humans fight Crixians hand to hand. They watched the interviews with the Valkyrie survivors, who described their rescuers with a mixture of gratitude and terror. The Crixians have been pushing toward our border for 20 years, said one general. A woman named Carol Hayes. We've been preparing for conflict. But this changes things. How so? Another officer asked. Because now everyone knows what happens when you attack something humans have decided to protect. She pointed at the screen, where Vrexstar was being returned to a Crixian ship in chains. That war captain will tell his people what he saw, and they'll think twice before they try again. Admiral Dunn nodded slowly. It's not just the Crixians who will hear about this. The Valkyrie government is already requesting formal diplomatic relations. They want an alliance. They want protection, Carol said. Same thing, in the end. Across the galaxy, the story spread. The Valkyrie told their neighbors about the humans who had come to their rescue. Those neighbors told others. Within weeks, the tale had reached dozens of species, each one adding their own perspective. Some saw the humans as heroes. Others saw them as dangerous animals that happened to be temporarily pointed in a useful direction. But all of them saw one thing clearly. Humanity was not a species to be ignored. On the Resolute Dawn, life returned to something like normal. The ship continued its patrol, mapping stars and watching for trouble. The Valkyrie survivors had been transferred to a Terran station, where they would eventually return to their own people. The captured Crixians had been handed over to diplomatic channels, their fate now in the hands of politicians rather than soldiers. But the crew had changed. They had all changed. Pete Garza sat in the medical bay, watching Dr. Torres run a final scan on his shoulder. The wound had healed well, thanks to advanced medical technology, but it would leave a scar. Pete didn't mind. He had plenty of scars. You were lucky, Amy told him. Another inch to the left and that claw would have hit your artery. Luck had nothing to do with it, Pete said. I've been fighting things with claws since I was 18. You learn where to let them hit you. Amy shook her head, but she was smiling. You humans are insane. We prefer the term determined. Elsewhere on the ship, Denise Lott was writing a letter. She did this after every mission, sitting alone in her quarters with a pen and paper. Old-fashioned technology that felt right for what she needed to say. Dear Lily, she wrote. The stars out here are beautiful. I wish you could see them. We had a rough mission this week, but everyone made it home safe. I can't tell you the details, but I want you to know that we helped some people who really needed it. That's what makes this job worth doing. She paused, thinking about her daughter back on Earth. Lily was 7 years old and thought her mother's job was boring. Denise hoped she would never have to learn the truth. I'll be home in 4 months, she continued. Save some of those cookies for me. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. She signed a letter, sealed it, and sent it to the communication queue. It would reach Earth in about 3 weeks, bouncing through relay stations at the speed of light. By the time Lily read it, Denise might be fighting something else, somewhere else. But the words would be there, proof that she was still alive, still thinking about home. Kevin Marsh had a different way of processing the mission. He went to the holding area where the Crixian prisoners had been kept before their transfer. It was empty now, just bare cells and cold metal walls. But he stood there anyway, thinking. He had killed for the first time on that station. 3 Crixians had fallen to his rifle. He had seen their bodies drop, seen the life leave their red eyes. It should have bothered him more than it did. But when he thought about the Valkyrie survivors, about their hollow bones and terrified faces, he found that he could live with what he had done. Some things were worth killing for. Some people were worth protecting. He was beginning to understand what it meant to be a human soldier. Hannah Vance spent her off-duty hours in the observation lounge, watching the stars pass by. She thought about Tavalis' words, about being terrifying not because of what humans could do, but because of what they chose to do. It was a strange kind of compliment, but she understood what the Valkyrie meant. Humans were killers. They had evolved on a death world, built for violence and survival. They could chase prey until it died of exhaustion. They could ignore wounds that would cripple other species. They could fight and kill with efficiency that bordered on the mechanical, but they could also choose not to. They could choose to protect instead of destroy. They could choose to answer a distress call from strangers they had never met, risking their lives for no reward except the knowledge that they had done the right thing. That was what made humans special. Not their strength or their endurance or their pain tolerance. Their ability to choose. Captain Jake Holloway stood on the bridge, watching his crew go about their duties. They were good people, all of them. They had volunteered for a job that might kill them, and they did it without complaint because they believed in something larger than themselves. The galaxy was a dangerous place. The Crixians were just one threat among many. There would always be predators, always be those who saw the weak as prey to be hunted. But as long as there were humans willing to stand between the hunters and the hunted, there was hope. His communicator beeped. A message from Fleet Command. Captain, the voice said, we've received intelligence that a Crixian battle fleet is massing near the sector where you conducted your rescue operation. They may be planning retaliation. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Understood. What are my orders? Hold position and await reinforcements. Carrier Group Constellation is being dispatched to your location. Admiral Dunn wants to send a message. Jake allowed himself a small smile. Understood. We'll be waiting. He closed the channel and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Crixians were preparing for war. They thought they knew what they were dealing with. They thought humans were just another species to be conquered, another weakness to be exploited. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The medical bay of the Resolute Dawn was small but well-equipped. Ship's Dr. Amy Torres had been a trauma surgeon on Earth before joining the fleet, and she had seen every kind of wound a human body could receive. Treating the Velkari survivors was something new. Their bodies were so fragile. Bones like glass, skin like paper, hearts that beat too fast, and muscles that had barely any strength. Amy had to adjust every piece of her equipment to handle them, reducing the power on scanners that could have damaged their cells, using medicines in doses so small they were almost nothing. Tavala sat on an examination table, watching the human doctor work. The other survivors had been treated and were resting in quarters that the crew had quickly prepared for them. But Tavala could not sleep. She had too many questions. "Your gravity," she said, as Amy ran a gentle scan over her arm. "How strong is it? On your homeworld?" Amy glanced at her, then back at her work. "About 9.8 meters per second squared. Why?" Tavala's translator struggled with the numbers for a moment, then converted them. Her eyes went wide. "That is nearly 3 times the gravity of my world, is it?" Amy said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I never really thought about it. How do you survive? How do you even walk?" Amy smiled. It was a gentle expression, but Tavala now understood how much strength lay behind it. "We just do. Our bodies are built for it. Dense bones, strong muscles. We don't think about it." Tavala was quiet for a moment. "The soldier who rescued me, the one called Hannah, she had a piece of metal in her leg. She was still walking, still fighting." "Hannah's tough," Amy agreed. "But honestly, most humans could do that. We have high pain tolerance. Our bodies produce chemicals when we're injured that let us keep functioning. It's a survival mechanism from when we were prey animals on our world." "Prey animals?" Tavala could not hide her confusion. "But you are clearly predators." Amy laughed softly. "We are now. But millions of years ago, we were just another animal trying not to get eaten. Our world is full of things with claws and teeth. Big cats, bears, wolves. Things that wanted to kill us. So we evolved to survive. We learned to work together, to think, to plan. And we learned to keep going even when we were hurt." She finished her scan and set down the device. "You know what made us the top of the food chain? It wasn't claws or venom or armor. It was persistence. We're pursuit predators. We would chase our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Nothing could outlast us." Tavala felt a chill run through her thin body. "Your world sounds terrifying." "It can be," Amy admitted. "But it's also beautiful. Blue skies, green forests, oceans that go on forever. It's home. We have a term for worlds like yours," Tavala said slowly. "Worlds with high gravity, dangerous predators, extreme conditions. We call them Deathworlds." Amy considered this. "Death world. I guess that's fair. But we don't see it that way. It's just normal. It's what we know." While Amy treated the survivors, Captain Jake Holloway was having a very different kind of conversation. The captured Crixians had been placed in the ship's holding cells. Most of them refused to speak, sitting in sullen silence and staring at the walls. But their leader, a war captain named Vrextor, had demanded to see the human commander. Jake stood outside the cell, looking through the transparent barrier at the creature inside. Vrextor was massive, even by Crixian standards, his armor scarred from countless battles. He looked at Jake with those solid red eyes, trying to project dominance. "You have made a grave mistake, human," Vrextor said. My people will not forget this insult. They will come for you." Jake didn't respond. Instead, he pressed a button on the wall, and a screen flickered to life beside the cell. It began playing footage from the boarding team's helmet cameras. Rexter watched as his warriors, elite hunters who had conquered dozens of species, were torn apart by creatures half their size. He watched Pete Garza take a claw through his shoulder and keep fighting. He watched Hannah Vance run toward the enemy with metal in her leg. He watched Denise Lott clear an entire corridor without missing a single shot. The footage ended. The cell was silent. "What are you?" Rexter asked. His voice had lost some of its confidence. Jake leaned forward, his face close to the barrier. "We're humans. We come from a world where everything wants to kill you. We've been fighting to survive since before we learned to make fire. We've killed predators bigger than you. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars that burned entire continents." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You came to that station to hunt scientists, researchers who couldn't fight back. You thought you were the monsters in the darkness." His voice dropped lower. "You were wrong." Rexter said nothing, but his claws, which had been scratching at the bench beside him, had gone still. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake continued. "We're going to return you to your people. And when we do, you're going to tell them something. You're going to tell them that humans answer distress calls. Any distress call. From anyone. And if you or any of your kind hurt the people we've decided to protect, we will come for you." He stepped back from the barrier. Spread the word. That night, Tavala could not sleep. She wandered the corridors of the human ship, marveling at how small everything seemed designed for creatures who lived in such high gravity. The air was thick and warm. The lights were bright. Everything felt heavy. She found Hannah Vance in the ship's small observation lounge, sitting by a window and looking out at the stars. The human had a bandage wrapped around her thigh where the metal had been removed. She looked tired but peaceful. "May I sit?" Tavala asked. Hannah nodded and gestured to the seat beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the distant lights of a billion suns. "I have been thinking," Tavala said finally, "about your species, about what you are, and what have you decided?" Tavala chose her words carefully. "My people have studied many species across the galaxy, predators and prey, builders and destroyers. We have always believed that the most dangerous creatures were those who killed for pleasure or power." She turned to look at Hannah. "But you are something different. You have the bodies of predators, the instincts of hunters, the ability to survive wounds that would kill us instantly. And yet you came here to a place where you had nothing to gain, risking your lives to save strangers." Hannah was quiet, waiting for her to continue. "I think," Tavala said slowly, "that you are the most terrifying species I have ever encountered. Not because of what you can do, but because of what you choose to do with it." Hannah smiled softly. "That's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said about humans. It was not meant as a compliment. I know." Hannah looked back out at the stars. "But I'll take it as one anyway." Tavala stayed by the window until the ship's artificial day began to brighten. She thought about Deathworlds and pursue predators. She thought about creatures who could ignore mortal wounds and chase their prey until it collapsed. She thought about what it meant that such beings had chosen to be protectors, and she wondered what the rest of the galaxy would do when they found out. The Crixian battle fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of metal and fire. 20 warships, each one bristling with weapons designed to crack planets open. At their head flew the Devastation, flagship of War Admiral Crixtal, the most decorated commander in the Dominion's history. Crixtal had conquered 17 species. He had burned worlds and broken civilizations. When his superiors had told him about the incident at the research station, About the humans who had dared to enter Crixian space and kill Crixian warriors. He had laughed. He was not laughing now. The Terran fleet was waiting for them. The carrier constellation hung in the center of the formation. A massive vessel that made even the largest Crixian ships look small. Around it flew 4 destroyers and 2 marine assault ships, their weapons already powered and their crews at battle stations. And at the edge of the formation, small but defiant, waited the resolute Dawn. "What is this?" Crixtal demanded, staring at the tactical display. Intelligence said there was only 1 ship here. "The humans must have called for reinforcements," his second-in-command replied. "They knew we were coming. Then they know they are about to die." Crixtal bared his teeth in what passed for a Crixian smile. "All ships advance. We will crush them and take their home as our prize." On the bridge of the constellation, Admiral Marcus Dunn watched the enemy fleet approach. He was calm, almost serene. He had been preparing for this moment for 30 years. "All ships, hold formation," he ordered. "Let them come to us," and open a channel to their flagship. The communication officer worked his console, and a moment later, Crixtal's face appeared on the main screen. The War Admiral looked exactly like his reputation suggested. Huge, scarred, and hungry for violence. "Human," Crixtal said, "you have invaded our territory. You have killed our warriors. You have interfered with our rightful conquest. For this, your species will pay with extinction." Dunn didn't flinch. "We answered a distress call. We rescued innocent people who were being hunted for sport. If that's invasion to you, then we have very different definitions of the word. Definitions do not matter. Only strength matters. And you are weak, am I?" Dunn leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something about humans, War Admiral. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the fastest or most advanced. But we have one thing that you don't understand. And what is that? We don't stop." Dunn's voice was quiet, but it carried across the bridge like thunder. "We have been fighting to survive since before we discovered fire. We have killed animals bigger than your ships with sticks and rocks. We have survived ice ages that lasted millennia. We have crossed oceans and conquered mountains and walked on the surface of our moon." He stood up from his chair, his old body straight and strong. "You think you know what predators are? We hunted our predators to extinction. You think you know what war is? We've been making war on each other for 10,000 years. We've developed weapons that can crack your homeworld in half, and strategies that would make your greatest generals weep." The bridge was silent. Every eye was on the screen. "You came here to punish us for helping others," Dunn continued. "That was a mistake. Because here's what you don't understand about humans. We're not just killers. We're protectors. We answer every call for help, from anyone, anywhere. And when you hurt something we've decided to protect, we don't negotiate. We don't retreat. We don't stop until the threat is eliminated." He pointed directly at Crixtal's image. "So here's your choice, War Admiral. You can turn your ships around and go home, and we'll pretend this never happened. Or you can attack, and we will destroy your fleet down to the last ship. And then we will find your homeworld, and we will make sure that the Crixian Dominion never threatens anyone ever again." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Choose." For a long moment, Crixtal stared at the human admiral. He had conquered 17 species. He had never lost a battle. He had never been spoken to like this by anyone. "You are bluffing," he said finally. "Your species is too young, too weak. You cannot match the might of the Dominion." Dunn smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Then come find out. The channel closed, and the battle began. The Crixian fleet charged forward, weapons blazing. Energy beams and missiles streaked across the void, lighting up the darkness like a storm of fire. The Terran ships responded in kind, their own weapons speaking in thunderous voices. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The Crixians fought like they always had, with overwhelming force and brutal aggression. They were apex predators, used to crushing their enemies through sheer strength. But the humans didn't fight like prey. They fought like something worse. They fought like predators who had learned to think. The Terran ships moved in perfect coordination, each one supporting the others, creating firing lanes and defensive positions that the Crixians couldn't break. When a Crixian ship pushed forward, 3 human ships would concentrate fire on it until it died. When the Crixians tried to flank, the humans anticipated the move and countered it before it could succeed. And through it all, the human crews kept fighting. Damage reports flooded the communication channels. Hull breaches, wounded crew, failing systems. But the ships kept moving, kept shooting, kept killing. Because that was what humans did. On the bridge of the devastation, Crixtel watched his fleet being torn apart. Ship after ship went dark, their crews dead or dying. The humans were not just winning. They were dismantling his forces with surgical precision. How? He whispered. How are they doing this? The answer was something he could not understand. The humans had not just evolved to survive on a death world. They had evolved to work together, to plan, to adapt. Every crew member on every ship knew exactly what they were fighting for. Not territory, not resources, not power. They were fighting to protect. 2 hours after the battle began, it was over. The Crixian fleet had been reduced to burning wreckage floating in the void. Only the devastation remained intact, surrounded by human ships, its weapons silenced and its hull covered in scars. Crixtel sat in his command chair, staring at the destruction around him. Everything he had known, everything he had believed about the universe, had been proven wrong in a single afternoon. The communication screen flickered to life. Admiral Dunn appeared again, looking tired but triumphant. Your fleet is destroyed, War Admiral. Your warriors are dead. You have lost. Crixtel had no words. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. I'm going to let you live, Dunn continued. Not because you deserve it, but because I need you to deliver a message. Go back to your Dominion. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that every time they try to hurt the innocent, we will be there. Every time they attack the weak, we will answer. Every time they think they can prey on those who cannot defend themselves, they will find us waiting. He leaned forward, his old eyes burning with cold fire. We are humans. We are the monsters that other monsters fear. And we have chosen to protect this galaxy from creatures like you. Remember that. Spread the word, and pray that you never see us again. The channel closed. The devastation was released, limping away into the darkness with its cargo of shame and terror. On the Resolute Dawn, the crew watched the broken Crixian ship disappear into hyperspace. They had won. More than that, they had sent a message that would echo across the stars for generations. Captain Jake Holloway stood on his bridge, surrounded by his exhausted but victorious crew. Pete Garza was in the medical bay, getting another wound treated. Denise Lott was already writing another letter to her daughter. Kevin Marsh was sitting quietly, thinking about what he had seen. And Hannah Vance was in the observation lounge, watching the stars. Molly Grant's voice cut through the silence of the bridge. Captain? I'm picking up another signal. Jake turned to look at her. What kind of signal? Distress call. From a species I don't recognize. They're about 60 light years away, in uncharted space. She looked at him with tired eyes. They're asking for help. Jake was quiet for a moment. His ship was damaged. His crew was exhausted. They had just fought a battle that would change the galaxy. But somewhere out there, someone was crying out in the darkness. Someone was afraid and alone and hoping that someone, anyone, would hear them. He straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. Set a course. The resolute Dawn turned toward the distant signal and jumped into hyperspace, carrying the hope of humanity into the unknown. Behind them, the wreckage of the Crixian fleet drifted in silence, a monument to what happened when predators met something worse. And across the galaxy, in 1,000 different languages, the story spread. The humans from the Death World, the monsters who answered distress calls, the predators who had chosen to be protectors. The reckoning had come, and it was only the beginning.